Hi, Brian from the Why Would You Wait Until Now to Give Black Widow her own movie? People have wanted one for years and you only wait until after her character is dead and the saga where she's a major player is literally over. She has absolutely no relevance anymore. The fact that you've waited this long to make it news is what your fans have wanted for a long, long time. Seriously, what the hell were you thinking? Brian here. Black Widow is the latest Marvel Cinematic Universe film. It is directed by Kate Shortland, who, sad to say, I am not familiar with at all, so watch another review to learn whether or not she was the best choice to direct this movie. Sorry. Everyone seems happy this film exists. Aside from Hawkeye, Natasha Romanoff, our Black Widow, was the only core Original Six Avenger without her own movie. I completely get why people feel this way. Because even amidst this massively crowded cast of heroes, she stood out. Something about her made this backstory pieced together across the MCU so emotionally real, like the character's history is worn on her sleeve. This is what, to me, has kept Black Widow relevant and genuinely feeling like an important figure in this universe, when it would be so easy for a character with no superpowers, kind of like Hawkeye, to seem unimportant or overshadowed by the likes of those who were more based in sci-fi or fantasy. Nothing can be said about Black Widow, the film, without addressing the many, let's be generous and say suboptimal circumstances of its release. As time went on, the impression became clear that, hey, we already know about this character extensively. What are we going to gain from a standalone adventure anymore? By 2021, it is long past time to make this movie already, but then her presence was unfortunately cut short with her death in Avengers Endgame. Marvel moving to only give Black Widow her own movie after her really unnecessary death leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Like, they killed her off, and only then said, fine, here you go, here's your damn Black Widow movie. It's fair to have wanted a Black Widow movie and be pleased that we now have one, but for my tastes, it's too little too late, such that the impact of her having built this presence that has persevered despite never having a movie of her own heavily outweighs the connection I will have to whatever her standalone film could show me. In universe, we have spent almost all our time building to the head of Infinity War and Endgame, and now that both of those movies have passed, we're returning to a point before them to develop something that, by all narrative implications, should exist to lead us towards that head. That's already happened. If you think back to Captain Marvel, this was also kind of a problem, although Black Widow doesn't come close to that film's revisionist approach to everything. And with this film having been a COVID victim as it was delayed, Marvel was forced to take essentially a year-long break after Endgame, just as, now more than ever, they need to preserve their momentum. They need to show us they have a plan that extends beyond Thanos and Infinity Stones. What I think happened is, Disney bet on us being so familiar with Black Widow that we returned to theaters in droves to see her, which, from the look of things, is working out relatively well for them. But from a context of preserving that post-Endgame momentum, Black Widow's not the story you want to fall back on because of its distance from any type of progress, especially as more and more of the MCU becomes hidden behind a Disney Plus subscription. Marvel just released something saying they're taking a more flippant, devil-may-care approach with actor contracts, and what all this is telling me is they don't have much of a plan anymore, especially with what I've heard about Loki. My guess is they're now content riding out purely on references to older films and the comics until that ceases being profitable. I'm just worried something is on the horizon that'll make Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker look like a game of hopscotch in terms of the calamitous damage to a franchise it creates. Now, I'm fully aware there are people satisfied Black Widow got her own movie in spite of how long it took, and if that's the boat you're in, I'd like to offer some material for further consideration as to how well they're actually paying tribute to this character. So even though Black Widow takes place just after Captain America: Civil War, the overall experience has that post-Endgame desperation for good ideas and insisting its own purpose rather than it feeling necessary in itself. You see, now that Disney is done with Natasha, there's no need for her to be the character you're excited to see again. Many people have praised Florence Pugh's character Yelena as especially welcome in the film. And yes, I will never protest Florence Pugh being seen by my eyeballs. But step outside this film for just a second and it becomes transparent how much they're pushing her as the new Black Widow surrogate. Everybody's writing articles like, oh, Florence Pugh is amazing, she steals the show. Like, yes, that's by design. The film, in a sense, deliberately ignores Natasha to prop up Yelena. Kind of a bad move for your incredibly belated standalone film for your fan-favorite character, isn't it? Black Widow is one of Marvel's more intriguing characters because of this intricate, layered backstory of things that made her who she is, feeling so much larger than her own control. And when this movie chooses to answer questions or deliver on that backstory, it does so in ways that result in kind of putting it in a box and tying it up with a bow. How they treat these mysterious struggles Natasha's had to face are reductive for seemingly no reason. So I don't like a whole lot of anything that is peripheral to it, but if you zero in on just Black Widow itself, this movie is not bad. I saw the trailer where she's flying through the wreckage in the sky and that really cringy don't slouch joke, and my reaction was something like,
This sucks, man.
But it really was not as bad as the trailer would have you believe. I don't know why they put the worst stuff in the trailer. The trashiest looking effect sequences, the cringiest jokes, the biggest gimmicks. Have I become so out of touch that that's what people are interested in seeing? This felt like a Phase 1, early Phase 2 movie that was just left on the shelf for 10 years. Had you removed the connection to where this is in the timeline, this could have come out next to Iron Man 3 and been fine. The action, the jokes, the stakes, they all feel perfectly appropriate for that era of the MCU. And despite my gripes, that was kind of refreshing in its own way. Scarlett Johansson is still great as Natasha, and the supporting cast all matches her. David Harbour, Rachel Weisz, and yes, Florence Pugh is entertaining, even if I think the movie's actively putting her over Natasha, and that's in bad taste. My eyes really glazed over during all the action scenes though, like the second unit team really pulled more than their weight here. So for all of the formula Black Widow settles into by the end, I guess somewhere in there I appreciated the cobbled family dynamic between the four leads the most. I expected their banter to really get in the way like it does in Guardians Volume 2 and especially Thor Ragnarok, but it didn't. I laughed quite a bit at the scene where Natasha and Yelena described their forced hysterectomy to David Harbour, not because that's funny, but because imagining the Disney Marvel writers' room approving such a dark joke is? So those parts of the movie are solid, but then it has issues creating a plot that justifies it all. I'd have loved for Black Widow to include a smaller scale but still entertaining spy story, as that's kinda sorta her entire identity. Reuniting with her family members one by one is nice, but lacks any real progression and build up to a finale. None of them get us any closer to resolving anything until, coincidentally, the final person they find knows exactly how to get to where they're going. And I kind of hate what the actual goal of this movie is. Spoilers? Black Widow unspools the character's backstory, laying it out to be taken care of at the last minute in the most simplistic, uncreative way possible before we say goodbye to her forever. I can't speak for the storm cloud of stan culture froth, but to me Black Widow was interesting because she seemed like a character who found her peace in the Avengers, strictly because really confronting her past was no longer possible. Natasha's problems and how they came to be never once in any other MCU film felt like they could be solved by storming the castle, so to speak. But then this movie comes along and offers near complete, unambiguous closure to her past. For nothing but a phony sense of overimportance, Black Widow is so stumped as to how to make this character face something compelling and personal. The film is about her taking down the entire Black Widow Red Room program, neatly tying up everything about her backstory because they can't think of anything else to do. which, I mean, I think you could do as maybe the end of a proper Black Widow trilogy that was appropriately spaced out over the years. But with how rushed everything about how this comes to pass as it is presented in this film, it's impossible for it not to feel like a total afterthought. Tell me again why people are so happy Black Widow finally has her own movie when it unwrites everything that was interesting and compelling about her. You have the villain, Taskmaster, who's only used as a plot device, which, let's talk about that. Everyone's beef with Marvel used to be their bad villains, and recently we've been spoiled by Thanos, Vulture, and even Hela and Ego. Taskmaster is astoundingly bad. She looks like a character from Mortal Kombat Annihilation. A character who is an amalgam of recycled Avengers ideas and gimmicks is really not what a film this bland needed. This one's gimmick is, I guess she has the Sharingan and can copy anything. Somehow. And by that I mean she shoots an arrow like Hawkeye once and pulls out some claws like Black Panther once. Literally every example of her copying an Avenger is in the trailer. You can guess the twist with her character from a mile away. Everything about her screams underdeveloped plot device that only exists because the characters gotta fight someone. Not everything about Black Widow is totally insufferable, but it has a severe underabundance of creativity, passion, purpose, impact, and all for what is supposed to be an MCU fan favorite character finally getting her dues. It's kind of thrown together and disjointed, I'm sad to say. To top it all off, in the post-credits scene, suddenly Elaine from Seinfeld is there, and I don't know why. I didn't even know Julia Louis-Dreyfus was in the MCU. And if you're gonna tell me in order to know who she is, I gotta watch one of those Marvel shows hidden behind the Disney Plus paywall, you can go f*** yourself. My take is this is on the much lower end of the MCU, especially if you look at it from a meta perspective and how the peripheral bureaucratic elements of the film do Natasha so dirty. Look at the film from even a single step back and the whole thing is surrounded by such rickety circumstances that whatever personality the film admittedly has at times ultimately just doesn't matter at that point. I'm thinking a high 4 to a low 5 for Black Widow for this film. Anyway, did you like this movie more than me? Less than me? Well, if you care to, please tell me. And as always, if you like not only words, but the way I arrange and then say them, please consider giving this video a like, helping me out with the algorithm, and subscribing to this channel. Brian from the channel Brian. Thank you, and goodbye.